The IBM lawyer's voice crackled through my mother's phone speaker, and I savored every word like aged wine. Mrs. Chen, I'm calling regarding patent US 108.473B, which your family sold to Tech Venture Capital for $200,000 last month. IBM's legal team has identified 17 distinct violations of our existing intellectual property. The damages we're seeking start at $50 million. My mother's face drained of color. She stood in her gaudy living room, the one she'd redecorated with my patent money, and her hand trembled so violently the phone nearly slipped. Behind her, my father froze mid-sip of his expensive whiskey. The bottle I knew cost more than the rent on my old apartment. My brother Derek stopped lounging on their new leather sofa, his expression shifting from lazy contentment to dawning horror. I sat in the corner they hadn't noticed when I walked in, watching their world collapse with the detached interest of someone who'd already lived through this nightmare once before. Except in my previous life, I'd been the one destroyed. This time, I'd engineered every single second of their downfall. There must be some mistake, my mother stammered. That patent was my daughter's work. We had every right to sell it. She signed. The patent itself isn't the issue, Miss Chen. The problem is that every algorithm, every process described in that patent directly incorporates proprietary IBM technology that's been protected since 2019. Your daughter either knowingly stole our intellectual property or, the lawyer paused meaningfully, someone forged her work using our protected systems. Either way, your family profited from the sale. That makes you liable. I took a slow sip of my tea and watched them squirm. You see, I died 3 years ago, or rather, 3 years in the future, depending on how you counted time after you've been reborn. In my first life, I'd been Lin Chen, the genius disappointment of the Chen family. Brilliant enough to earn a full ride to MIT, smart enough to work for IBM's advanced computing division, but never quite good enough for my family's impossible standards. Not pretty enough, not charming enough, not married to someone important enough. When I'd invented the quantum processing algorithm that could have revolutionized data encryption, my family had seen dollar signs. I'd been 28, working 100-hour weeks, living in a studio apartment because every spare penny went to my research. I'd trusted my mother when she said she'd help me file the patent. I'd believed my father when he promised to connect me with the right investors. I'd even accepted when Derek, my baby brother who'd never worked a real day in his life, offered to handle the business side. They'd stolen everything, forged my signature, sold my patent to the highest bidder, and split the money 3 ways. By the time I discovered the betrayal, they'd already spent most of it. My mother had her beach house. My father had his sports car. Derek had invested in some cryptocurrency scheme that actually paid off, the lucky bastard. I'd sued. Of course I'd sued. But they'd covered their tracks well. And I'd been a broke 28-year-old going up against a family with resources and a lawyer who specialized in family business disputes. The judge had ruled that without clear proof of forgery and with my signature on the documents, no matter how fake I claimed it was, I had no case. The stress had destroyed me. I'd developed anxiety so severe I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, lost my job at IBM because I couldn't focus. My reputation in the tech community was ruined because everyone thought I'd willingly sold out for quick cash and was now trying to scam my own family for more money. I died at 31, alone in that same studio apartment. From a combination of prescription pills and despair, then I'd woken up at 25. Same apartment, same job at IBM. Same family who hadn't yet figured out how to steal from me because I hadn't yet created anything worth stealing. But this time, I had 3 years of memories, 3 years of pain, and an intimate knowledge of exactly how to destroy them. I don't understand, my father was saying now, his voice pitched higher than I'd ever heard it. How can IBM claim ownership? Lynn worked on this independently in her own time. Mr. Chen, I'm not at liberty to discuss the technical details over the phone. What I can tell you is that our forensic analysis shows that the core architecture of the patent is built on proprietary IBM systems, systems that your daughter had access to as an employee. This is exactly the kind of intellectual property theft that our employment contracts explicitly prohibit. I'd spent 18 months planning this moment. 18 months of working late nights at IBM, gaining access to more advanced systems, learning exactly which technologies were protected and how. Then I'd carefully, meticulously created a patent that looked brilliant and revolutionary on the surface. To anyone without deep knowledge of IBM's proprietary tech, it would seem like an independent breakthrough in quantum computing. But I'd built it like a Trojan horse. Every algorithm referenced IBM's protected work just enough to create undeniable liability, but not so obviously that it would be caught in a routine patent review. I'd designed it specifically to pass initial scrutiny, but collapse under forensic analysis, the kind of analysis that would only happen after someone tried to monetize it. Then I'd left breadcrumbs for my family to follow. Careless mentions of my breakthrough. Documents left on the kitchen table when I visited for their weekly mandatory dinner. Excited phone calls about how this patent could be worth hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. I'd known exactly what they'd do. They'd done it before, after all. Sure enough, 2 months ago, my mother had suggested over dinner that she could help me navigate the patent process. My father had offered to introduce me to his connections in the venture capital world. Derek had volunteered to handle the paperwork, said he'd been studying up on intellectual property law. I'd played naive and grateful. I'd signed where they told me to sign. Documents I'd carefully reviewed first, making sure they were forging my consent to sell just like last time. I'd pretended not to notice when the meetings with investors kept happening without me. I'd acted confused when they said the patent was still in process, even as I tracked its sale through back channels. They'd gotten their $200,000, split it 3 ways just like before. My mother had already started looking at beach houses again. My father had been browsing luxury cars online. Derek had been researching investment opportunities, and I'd waited for IBM's legal team to do exactly what I'd known they'd do. "We'll need to schedule a meeting with you and your family immediately," the lawyer continued, "along with your daughter. Ms. Lin Chen is named as the inventor on the patent, which means she's also potentially liable for the IP theft. We'll need to determine whether she was a willing participant or if she was defrauded by her own family." That was my cue. I stood up, smoothing down my skirt, and walked into their line of sight. "Oh, I think I can clarify that right now," I said pleasantly. My mother spun around, her face cycling through surprise, relief, and then confusion as she saw my expression. I wasn't scared, I wasn't worried. I was smiling. "Lynn, thank God you're here. There's been some terrible mistake. IBM is claiming that your patent violates their intellectual property. You need to explain to them that you invented this independently." "Actually, I can't do that," I interrupted, keeping my voice light and cheerful, "because it would be a lie. I very specifically built that patent using IBM's proprietary technology. Every single algorithm, every process. I made absolutely sure it was derivative of their protected work." The silence in the room was beautiful. "What?" My father's whiskey glass slipped from his hand, shattering on their expensive hardwood floor. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I set you up." I turned to my mother's phone where the IBM lawyer was waiting. "Hi, Mr. Richardson. This is Lin Chen. I'm the named inventor on the patent in question. I want to state clearly for the record that I did not authorize the sale of that patent. My family forged my consent and sold my work without my knowledge or permission. I've already filed a police report for identity theft and fraud." "Ms. Chen," the lawyer's tone shifted, becoming less adversarial and more intrigued. "Are you saying you have proof that your signature was forged?" "Extensive proof. Time-stamped documentation showing I was at work during the meetings where I supposedly signed the sales agreements. Security footage from IBM showing me in the building. Email. Oh, hey. Correspondence that contradicts the timeline in the forged documents. And most importantly, I have my original research notes, which clearly show that I intentionally incorporated IBM's protected technology. I flagged it in my personal documentation as a reminder to strip it out before filing. Someone would have to be either monumentally stupid or deliberately malicious to file a patent with that IP still embedded. I looked at my family's shocked faces. They were both. "You..." My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "You did this on purpose." Of course I did. I sat back down, crossing my legs comfortably. You stole from me before. Sorry. You were going to steal from me. I decided to let you do it again, but this time with consequences. Before, Derek had found his voice, though it cracked on the word. What the hell are you talking about? I wasn't about to explain rebirth to them. Instead, I smiled and said, I've known for a while that you were planning to steal my work. Call it intuition. So I created something that looked valuable but was actually poisoned. Every dollar you made from that sale comes with a $50 million lawsuit attached. Congratulations. Ms. Chen, the lawyer said, and I could hear the approval in his voice. IBM would like to discuss this matter with you in person. Given your cooperation and the evidence of fraud, we're prepared to pursue damages solely against the parties who actually profited from the theft. We'd also like to discuss your employment status and some opportunities in our advanced research division. I'd be happy to meet with your team, I said. Shall we say tomorrow morning? 10 a.m., I'll have my assistant send you the details. I ended the call and looked at my family. Really looked at them. My mother, who'd once told me I was wasting my intelligence on playing with computers when I should focus on finding a rich husband. My father, who'd compared me unfavorably to Derek my entire life, despite the fact that Derek had failed out of 2 colleges and lived off their money. My brother, who'd borrowed thousands from me over the years and never paid back a cent, who'd called me selfish when I'd finally said no. You can't do this, my mother said, her voice hardening as the shock wore off and familiar arrogance crept back in. We're your family. You can't just sue you, report you to the police, cooperate with IBM's legal team to make sure you're held fully accountable. I ticked off each item on my fingers. Actually, I can do all of those things. I already have. We raised you. My father's face had gone red, that vein in his temple pulsing the way it always did when he was about to explode. Everything you have, you owe to us. We paid for your education. I had a full scholarship, Dad. You didn't pay for anything except the guilt trips. We gave you a home, food, support. You gave me trauma and impossible expectations. The home came with constant criticism. The food came with lectures about how I was too fat, too thin, too ungrateful. The support was conditional on me being exactly who you wanted me to be, which was apparently a pretty face to marry off, not a person with her own ambitions. After everything we've done for you, my mother's voice had taken on that martyr quality she'd perfected over the years. This is how you repay us? By destroying your own family? I stood up again, slinging my bag over my shoulder. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure you did it in a way that couldn't hurt me this time. Oh, and one more thing, that $200,000 you got? You might want to hold on to whatever's left. IBM's lawyers mentioned that if you can't pay the damages, they'll go after every asset you own. The house, the cars, Derek's crypto portfolio, all of it. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. Actually, no. Don't hold on to it. Spend every penny, live it up, because that'll make it even more satisfying when they take everything else. I left them there, frozen in their expensive living room, surrounded by all the things they'd bought with my stolen work. The drive back to my apartment should have felt triumphant, but instead, I just felt tired. Satisfied, but tired. The thing about revenge is that everyone imagines it feels good. They imagine it's this rush of pure joy watching the people who hurt you suffer. But the reality is more complicated. Yes, there was satisfaction. Yes, there was a sense of justice finally being served, but there was also this hollow awareness that I'd spent 18 months of my second chance at life focused on destruction instead of creation. Still, as I parked in front of my building, the same studio apartment I'd died in last time, though this time it didn't feel like a prison, I didn't regret my choices. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. My family had never respected me, never valued me, never seen me as anything more than a resource to exploit. If I'd simply refused to create anything they could steal, they would have found other ways to use me, manipulate me, drain me. This way, at least, they'd never try again. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Miss Chen, this is Rebecca Walsh from IBM Legal. Mr. Richardson asked me to reach out. We've reviewed your employment file and your research contributions. In addition to tomorrow's meeting about the patent case, our VP of Advanced Research would like to discuss a promotion and significant raise. Are you available for a preliminary call this evening? I typed back, available at 7 p.m. Another text, this time from my landlord. Lynn, I know you're month to month, but wanted to give you first heads up. Building's going condo. If you want to buy your unit, I can offer you a good price before it goes to market. In my first life, I'd been forced to move because I couldn't afford the condo conversion. I'd ended up in an even worse place, a basement studio with mold and mice, this time promotion coming and IBM's legal team on my side against my family. Maybe I'd actually have the financial stability to buy. My phone buzzed again, my mother. How could you do this to us? I blocked the number, then Derek. Lynn, please, we need to talk. There has to be a way to fix this. Blocked. My father, you're no daughter of mine. That one almost made me laugh. I blocked him too. Then, surprisingly, a call from a number I did recognize. My cousin Jennifer, my mom's sister's daughter. We'd been close as kids, but drifted apart in our 20s. I almost didn't answer, assuming she was calling on my mother's behalf, but curiosity won out. Don't hang up, she said immediately when I picked up. I'm not calling to guilt trip you. Actually, I'm calling to say it's about damn time. I blinked. What? Your mom's been bragging for weeks about some big windfall they got from selling your patent. My mom was super impressed, kept saying how smart they were to manage your career since you're too focused on work to handle the business side yourself. But I remember you, Lynn. I remember how brilliant you are, how hard you worked, and I thought, there's no way you'd just hand over something worth that much money without a fight. So I figured either they stole it from you, or, she paused, or you let them think they were stealing it. Which, given the fact that you're not in jail and they apparently are about to be sued into oblivion, I'm guessing it's option 2. I found myself smiling. You always were the smart one in the family. Please, you were the smart one. I just paid attention. She laughed, but there was an edge to it. Look, I know I'm not exactly in a position to offer help. I'm a struggling graphic designer with student loans and a cat. But if you need someone to, I don't know, testify about what a bunch of assholes your parents are, I'm available. Your mom's been insufferable for years, and Derek's been mooching off them for so long, I don't think he remembers how to actually work. Thanks, Jen. I might take you up on that. Good. Also, and I'm totally serious about this, if you ever want to grab coffee and actually catch up, without the family bullshit, let me know. I missed you. We talked for another 20 minutes, the easiest conversation I'd had in months. By the time we hung up with plans to meet for brunch on Sunday, I felt something shift in my chest. Not all of my family was toxic. Not all of my relationships had been poisoned. I'd just been so focused on the ones who'd hurt me that I'd forgotten about the ones who hadn't. At 7 p.m. sharp, Rebecca Walsh called. Ms. Chen, thank you for making time. I've been authorized to discuss a substantial offer with you, but first I want to confirm some details about the patent situation. You stated that you deliberately incorporated IBM's proprietary technology into your patent. Can you walk me through why? I'd prepared for this question. I discovered that my family was planning to steal my work. I had evidence, but knew that by the time a civil case made it through the courts, they'd have spent any money they made and I'd be left with nothing but legal bills. So I created a situation where their theft would have immediate, devastating consequences that didn't depend on my ability to afford a lengthy lawsuit. That's remarkably strategic. There was a pause, then, off the record, Ms. Chen, that's also absolutely brilliant. We have entire teams dedicated to IP protection, and you essentially created a legal trap more effective than anything they've devised. On the record, however, I need to confirm that you did not intend to actually sell or profit from the patent containing our protected technology. Correct. I filed it solely as bait. I never attempted to sell it myself, never licensed it, never implemented it. My only intent was to document what appeared to be a legitimate invention, so that when my family stole and sold it, they'd be the ones facing consequences, not me. And you have documentation proving that you knew the patent was problematic? Extensive documentation, research notes, flagged sections in my files, emails to myself outlining the IP concerns. I can prove that I was fully aware the patent couldn't be legally sold and that anyone attempting to do so would face liability. Excellent. Then IBM's position's clear. We have no grievance with you. In fact, we're impressed by your strategic thinking and your loyalty in protecting our IP, even if the method was unconventional. Her tone shifted, becoming warmer. Now let's talk about your future at IBM. How would you feel about leading your own research team? We talked for over an hour. The promotion came with a 60% raise, a research budget that made my eyes water, and the freedom to pursue projects of my own choosing, as long as I properly documented any IP concerns this time. They also wanted me to consult with their legal team on developing better protection strategies for employee innovations. By the time I hung up, my old salary felt like a distant memory. I immediately called my landlord back and told him I wanted to buy my unit. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. In my first life at this point, I would have been spiraling into depression. My family would have taken everything, my career would have been stalling out, and I'd have been facing years of struggle just to survive. Instead, I had a promotion, a raise, a place to live that I'd actually own, and the satisfaction of knowing that the people who'd betrayed me were drowning in consequences of their own making. I should have felt purely victorious. Instead, I kept thinking about my mother's face when she'd realized what I'd done. That moment of complete incomprehension, the inability to understand how her daughter, her supposedly naive, work-obsessed daughter, had outmaneuvered her so completely. In my first life, that look had been on my face when I'd discovered their betrayal. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. Ms. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the SFPD Fraud Division. I'm calling about your identity theft report. Based on the documentation you provided, we have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges against your family members. I wanted to give you a heads up before we proceed. This will likely be a high-profile case given the dollar amounts involved. Are you prepared for that? Was I prepared to watch my family face not just civil penalties, but potential criminal prosecution? To see my mother, my father, and my brother potentially go to jail? In my first life, they'd shown me no mercy. They'd taken everything and felt entitled to it. When I'd begged them to just return some of the money, enough to cover my rent and food, they'd told me I was being dramatic. When I'd tried to explain how their theft had destroyed my reputation and career, they'd said I should have been smarter about protecting my work. Yes, I told Detective Martinez. I'm prepared. Proceed with the charges. Understood. We'll be in touch about next steps. One more thing. Your evidence is some of the most meticulously organized documentation I've seen in a fraud case. It's like you knew exactly what we'd need to build a case. Let's just say I'm thorough, I replied. After I hung up, I allowed myself one moment of pure, uncomplicated satisfaction. Then I did something I hadn't done in either life. I ordered takeout from the expensive Thai place down the street, poured myself a glass of the cheap wine I kept for special occasions, and watched a movie just because I wanted to, not because I was too exhausted from work to do anything else. For the first time since I'd woken up at 25 with memories of a life I'd already lived, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, I dressed carefully for my meeting with IBM. Professional but confident. The woman in the mirror looked like me, but different. Less worn down, less apologetic for taking up space, more certain of exactly what she was worth. The IBM legal offices were in a sleek downtown building I'd never had clearance to visit before. Rebecca Walsh met me in the lobby, a sharp woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a handshake that could crack walnuts. Ms. Chen, pleasure to finally meet you in person. Mr. Richardson is running a few minutes behind, so I thought we could chat first. She led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Coffee, water? Coffee would be great. As we settled in with our drinks, she pulled out a tablet and swiped through the several documents. I've been reviewing the patent in question and your research notes. This is going to sound strange, but the work itself, stripped of the IBM IP, is actually quite innovative. The core concept of using quantum entanglement for real-time encryption key generation is solid. It's just wrapped in our protected implementation methods. I nodded. That was intentional. I needed the patent to look valuable enough that my family would actually go through with stealing it, but problematic enough that it would self-destruct the moment they tried to monetize it. Like I said yesterday, brilliant and terrifying. She smiled. We'd like you to recreate the patent properly. Use your own methodology, develop it through IBM's official research channels with proper IP documentation, and we'll split any licensing revenue 70-30 in IBM's favor, which, given our resources for development and marketing, would likely net you far more than if you tried to go it alone. That's extremely generous. We prefer to think of it as good business. Employees who feel fairly compensated and respected don't steal IP or leave for competitors. Employees who feel exploited do both. She leaned back in her chair. Between you and me, what you did, turning your family's theft into a legal trap, that takes not just intelligence but nerve. Those are qualities we value highly. The door opened and Mr. Richardson entered, followed by two other people I didn't recognize. For the next 3 hours, we went through every detail of the case. They confirmed that with my cooperation and documentation, they had an airtight case against my family. The damages would likely bankrupt them completely. There is one thing we need to address, Mr. Richardson said near the end of the meeting. Your family will almost certainly try to claim that you masterminded this scheme to defraud them, that you deliberately created a flawed patent and tricked them into stealing it. Let them try, I said calmly. My documented research clearly shows me flagging the IP concerns for my own reference. Any reasonable person would interpret that as me trying to avoid accidentally incorporating protected technology, not as me deliberately creating a trap. The fact that they stole and sold the patent despite having no technical expertise to evaluate it just proves their negligence and greed. Yes, but they may argue that you should have warned them explicitly that the patent was problematic. I met his eyes steadily. Why would I warn people who were stealing from me? The moment they forged my signature and sold my work without my permission, they became thieves, not family. I had no obligation to protect them from the consequences of their own criminal actions. One of the other lawyers, a younger woman who'd been quiet until now, actually smiled. I like her. So do we, Mr. Richardson agreed. Ms. Chen, assuming this case goes the way we expect, you're going to come out of this with a significant reputation boost. The tech community loves a good David versus Goliath story, and brilliant engineer outsmarts her own family's attempt to steal her work is going to play very well. I hadn't thought about that angle. In my first life, my reputation had been destroyed. In this life, I might actually end up with my reputation enhanced. We wrapped up the meeting with handshakes and assurances. As I left the building, stepping out into the San Francisco sunlight, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Apparently, word was already spreading through the tech community about the case. A message from a former MIT classmate. Lynn, just heard about IBM suing your family over that patent. Are you okay? Do you need anything? A LinkedIn message from a professor I'd respected. Ms. Chen, I heard about the situation with your family. I wanted you to know that if you need a character reference or expert testimony about your work ethic and integrity, I'd be honored to provide it. An email from TechCrunch. We're running a story about the IBM patent lawsuit. Would you be willing to provide a statement? I responded to my classmate and professor with thanks. I told TechCrunch to contact IBM's media relations department. Then I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb and went to a park near my apartment, found a bench in the sun, and just sat there for an hour, letting everything settle. The next few days were a whirlwind. The story broke online and went viral, exactly the way Mr. Richardson had predicted. The narrative crystallized quickly. Brilliant young engineer outsmarts her own family's attempt to steal her life's work. Some outlets focused on the technical aspects, marveling at how I'd essentially created a legal landmine. Others focused on the family drama, painting my parents and brother as villainous and greedy. My inbox exploded with interview requests, job offers from competitors, which I politely declined, and speaking invitations. I even got a message from a literary agent asking if I'd consider writing a book about the experience. But the most satisfying messages were the ones from other people in the tech industry sharing their own stories of family betrayal, of being underestimated and stolen from. Apparently, my situation resonated with more people than I'd realized. 3 weeks after that initial phone call with IBM's lawyer, I sat in a courtroom watching my family's civil case unfold. They'd hired a lawyer, obviously, but there was only so much even a good attorney could do when the evidence was overwhelming. My mother looked older, worn down in a way I'd never seen. My father's usual blustering confidence was gone, replaced with a grim acceptance. Derek just looked confused, like he still couldn't understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The judge ruled in IBM's favor on every count. The damages, $47 million. My family's assets would be seized and auctioned off. They'd be on payment plans for the rest of their lives, assuming they could find employment after being convicted of fraud. Because yes, the criminal charges had gone through too. They were each facing up to 5 years in prison, though their lawyer was negotiating for reduced sentences in exchange for immediate asset forfeiture and admission of guilt. I felt nothing watching them. No triumph, no sadness, just a distant kind of closure. After the ruling, I left through a side exit to avoid the media circus out front. But my mother caught up with me in the parking garage. "Lynn, wait." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "What do you want?" "How can you do this?" Her voice cracked. "We're your family, your blood. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I finally turned to face her. "It did, once. But you taught me that family is only as valuable as the respect and love it comes with. You never respected me. You never loved me for who I was. Only for what you thought you could get from me. So, no. Family doesn't mean anything anymore. You made sure of that. We made mistakes, but this..." She gestured helplessly back toward the courthouse. "This is cruel, vindictive. You've destroyed us." "You destroyed yourselves," I said, echoing what I'd told her weeks ago in her living room. "You chose to steal from me. You chose to forge my signature. You chose to sell my work for your own profit. I just made sure that when you made those choices, there were consequences you couldn't escape. That's not cruelty, that's justice." "You could have warned us," she said desperately. "You knew that patent was problematic. You could have told us before we sold it." "You could have not committed fraud," I countered. "You could have respected my work and my rights. You could have been actual parents instead of opportunistic leeches. But you didn't. So here we are." She stared at me, tears streaming down her face, and for just a moment I felt a flicker of the old pain. The child who'd wanted her mother's approval, who'd worked so hard to be good enough, to be worth loving. But that child had died in my first life, alone and betrayed. The woman I was now had no room for that kind of vulnerability. "Goodbye, Mom," I said and walked away. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, an actual office with a door and a window, reviewing research proposals from my team when my assistant knocked. "Ms. Chen, you have a visitor. She says she's your cousin." Jennifer walked in carrying 2 coffee cups and a box of donuts. "Surprise! I was in the neighborhood and thought you might need a sugar break." I laughed and gestured for her to sit. "You're the best. How's the graphic design business?" "Actually, really good. Remember how I said I had that one corporate client? They just signed me for a year-long contract. I might actually be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment soon." She bit into a donut and studied me. "You look good, Lynn. Really good. Not just the fancy office and the nice suit, but like, you look happy." "I am happy," I realized as I said it. Genuinely happy. The work is challenging, my team is brilliant, and I don't have to worry about anyone stealing from me or undermining me. "Have you heard from your parents at all?" "No, they're serving their sentence. 18 months each, plus probation. Derek got 3 years because he had the most active role in the fraud. After that, they'll be on payment plans to IBM for the rest of their lives." I paused. "Your mom must have an opinion about all this?" Jennifer snorted. "Oh, she has opinions. mostly about how her sister always was too focused on money and taught those boys that they deserved everything without working for it. She's actually pretty proud of you in her way. Said you handled it like a Chen, strategic and ruthless. I'm not sure that's a compliment coming from this family. In this family, it's the highest compliment. She grinned. But seriously, I'm proud of you too. What you did took guts. A lot of people would have just walked away, tried to rebuild without confronting the people who hurt them. You made sure they faced consequences. We talked for another hour about lighter things, her dating life, my promotion, a trip to Japan we were planning together for the spring. When she finally left, I felt lighter. Not everyone in my family was toxic. Some of them were worth keeping. That evening, I had dinner with Rebecca Walsh and her wife, a software engineer I'd hit it off with at a company party. We'd become friends over the past few months, bonding over wine and shared experiences in the tech industry. Over pasta and too much wine, Rebecca asked me the question I'd been expecting. Do you regret it? Any of it? I considered carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my family valued money more than they valued me. I regret that I had to spend 18 months of my life planning revenge instead of just living. But do I regret actually doing it? No. They would have destroyed me if I'd let them. Again, this way, at least I'm free. Again? Rebecca caught the word immediately. I laughed it off. Figure of speech. They'd been working up to stealing from me for years. It would have happened eventually. But later, lying in my bed in the condo I now owned outright, paid off with my increased salary and a generous signing bonus from IBM, I thought about that word again. Because that's what this had really been about, hadn't it? Not just preventing a future betrayal, but avenging a past one that only I remembered. I'd lived through their theft once, felt the humiliation and despair of being betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, died because of it, technically. And when I'd been given an impossible second chance, what had I done with it? I'd used it for revenge. Some people might say that was a waste, that I should have used my rebirth to be better, kinder, more forgiving, that I should have just walked away from my family and built a new life without them, without the need for retribution. But those people had never felt the crushing weight of betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect you. They'd never known what it was like to be so systematically devalued and exploited that you literally died from the stress of it. I'd used my second chance to make sure it never happened again, to me or anyone else. My family would never steal from another young engineer. The tech community had a new cautionary tale about the importance of proper IP documentation and the dangers of family fraud. And I had my life back, my career back, my future back. If that was revenge, then revenge had been worth it. A year after the lawsuit, I was invited to speak at a Women in Tech conference about IP protection and family business boundaries. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of young women who were brilliant and ambitious and so often undervalued, I told them my story. Not the whole story. I left out the rebirth part, obviously, but the essentials. Your work has value, I told them. Your intelligence has value, and you deserve to be compensated and respected for both. If the people in your life, family, friends, partners, don't recognize that value, don't respect it, then they don't deserve access to it. Protect yourselves. Document everything. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you owe them your accomplishments just because they're related to you or because they supported you in some vague, unquantifiable way. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of women came up to me with their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking openly about something most people kept private. One young engineer, barely 23, told me her parents were pressuring her to sign over the rights to her new app so they could manage it properly. Don't do it, I told her firmly. If they respected you and your work, they wouldn't be pressuring you. They'd be supporting you in managing it yourself. Get a lawyer, document everything, and make it clear that your work is yours alone. She hugged me, tears in her eyes. Thank you. Everyone keeps telling me I'm being paranoid, that family wouldn't steal from family, but you get it. I did get it because I'd lived it twice. As I flew home that night, exhausted but satisfied, I realized something. The revenge had been necessary, yes, but this, helping other people avoid the same betrayal, using my experience to protect others, this was what made the whole thing worthwhile. This was how I could turn something that had been done to me into something that had meaning beyond just my own satisfaction. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Chen, this is Marcus Williams from Tech Venture Capital. We were the ones who bought your family's stolen patent. I wanted to reach out personally to apologize for our role in that situation and to see if you'd be interested in discussing future opportunities. We've learned a hard lesson about proper due diligence, and we'd like to make it right. I stared at the message for a long moment. Tech Venture had lost their $200,000 investment when the patent was invalidated. They'd been victims of my family's fraud, too. Technically, though, they should have been more careful in their verification process. I typed back, I appreciate the apology. I'm not interested in working with TVC directly, but I'd be happy to discuss consultation opportunities around IP verification and fraud prevention. My rate is $500 per hour. His response was almost immediate. That's more than fair. Let's schedule a call. By the time I landed, we had a meeting set up for the following week. I'd essentially turned my family's attempted theft into a new income stream. The irony was delicious. 2 years after the initial lawsuit, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. My research team had published 3 groundbreaking papers. I'd been promoted again, this time to Director of Advanced Quantum Research. I'd bought a house, an actual house with a yard and everything, in a neighborhood I'd only dreamed about affording before. And I'd met someone. Dr. Sarah Kim was a physics professor at Stanford, brilliant and funny and completely unintimidated by my success. We'd met at a conference, bonded over shared frustration with academic politics, and somehow ended up dating. She knew the broad strokes of what had happened with my family, but not the details, not the depth of the planning and manipulation involved. One night, lying in bed at her place, she asked me, "Do you ever feel guilty about what happened to them?" "No," I said honestly. "Should I?" "I don't know. That's why I'm asking." She propped herself up on one elbow, studying me in the dim light. "Your family is bankrupt, your brother's in prison, your parents' lives are essentially destroyed. You orchestrated that. Don't you ever wonder if you went too far?" I thought about it carefully. They stole from me. They committed fraud, forgery, identity theft. Everything that happened to them was a direct consequence of their own criminal actions. I didn't make them do any of that. I just made sure that when they did it, they couldn't get away with it. But you baited them into it. You deliberately created a situation designed to maximize their punishment. Yes, I agreed. I did, because I caught myself before saying previous life. In my experience, people like them don't stop unless they're forced to stop. They would have kept exploiting me, kept stealing from me, kept treating me like a resource instead of a person. This way, they can't hurt anyone else. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm not saying what you did was wrong. I'm just asking if you ever question it." I question whether I should have spent so much time and energy on it, I admitted. Whether focusing on revenge for 18 months was the healthiest choice. But I don't question the outcome. They needed to face consequences, and they did. If that makes me cold or vindictive, so be it. At least I'm free. She kissed me then, soft and understanding. "You're not cold. You're just someone who learned to protect herself. There's a difference." I loved her a little bit more in that moment. 5 years after the rebirth, I finally went to visit my mother. She'd been released from prison 6 months earlier and was living in a small apartment in a part of town I'd never visited before. The address alone told me how far she'd fallen, from her mansion to this rundown complex with bars on the windows and graffiti on the walls. I wasn't sure why I went. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure. Maybe some residual need to see with my own eyes that the woman who'd given birth to me and then betrayed me was truly finally defeated. She answered the door looking 10 years older than she should have. Gray hair, tired eyes, clothes from a thrift store. When she saw me, she didn't seem surprised. "Lynn, I wondered if you'd ever come." "Can I come in?" Her apartment was tiny, one bedroom with a kitchenette and a bathroom. Sparse furniture, mostly secondhand. No decorations, no personality, just the bare minimum needed to survive. We sat at her small kitchen table, and neither of us spoke for a long moment. Finally, she said, "You won." "This wasn't about winning," I replied. "This was about justice." "Justice," she repeated bitterly. "Is this justice? Your father and I losing everything, Derek still in prison, our lives destroyed?" "Yes," I said simply. "You stole from me. You committed fraud. You got caught. These are the natural consequences of criminal behavior. That's literally what justice is. We're your parents. We raised you. You housed me and fed me, which is the bare minimum legal requirement for parents. You never actually supported me. You criticized me constantly, compared me to Derek endlessly, and made it clear that my only value was in what you could get from me. That's not parenting, that's cultivation." She flinched at the word. "What are you going to do now?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Work? Pay my debts, exist, I guess." She looked around her tiny apartment. "I got a job at a grocery store. Minimum wage. At my age. After everything I had, everything I was." "Everything you stole," I corrected. "You had nothing that you actually earned. You had a life built on exploitation and theft. This," I gestured at her apartment, "this is what you actually deserve." "You really hate us, don't you?" "No," I said, and realized it was true. "I don't hate you. I don't feel anything for you at all anymore. You're just the woman who gave birth to me and then taught me that trust is dangerous and family is conditional. That's all you are. A cautionary tale." I stood up to leave, and she grabbed my wrist. "Lynn, please, I know I don't deserve it, but if you could just a little help, a loan, something. I'm barely surviving." I looked down at her hand on my wrist, then up at her desperate face. "No," I said calmly, pulling free of her grips, "and you made your choices. Live with them." I left her there, in that tiny apartment, drowning in the consequences of her own actions, and I felt nothing but relief. Outside, the sun was shining. I had dinner plans with Sarah, a research presentation to prepare for tomorrow, and a life that was entirely, completely mine. No obligations to people who didn't value me. No fear of betrayal. No need to prove myself to anyone except myself. I'd used my second chance for revenge, yes, but I'd also used it to build exactly the life I wanted, free from the people who'd tried to destroy me. If I was given a third chance, I wouldn't change a thing. Years passed. My career continued to soar. I won awards, published papers, built a reputation as one of the leading quantum computing researchers in the country. Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony with only the people who actually mattered. Her family, my cousin Jennifer, colleagues who'd become true friends. I never saw my father or brother again. My mother sent me a letter once, 5 years after our last meeting. I didn't read it, just threw it away unopened. Whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. Jennifer asked me once if I ever regretted cutting them off completely. "How can I regret losing something I never actually had?" I replied. "They were never really my family. They were just people I was related to who used me. Losing them wasn't a loss. It was liberation." She'd hugged me then and said, You're the strongest person I know." But I didn't feel strong. I just felt free. The truth about revenge, the truth nobody tells you, is that it doesn't heal you. It doesn't erase what was done to you. It doesn't make you whole again. What it does is give you control, agency, the ability to say, "You hurt me and there are consequences for that." In my first life, I'd been powerless, a victim of my family's greed and manipulation. I'd died powerless, alone, with nothing to show for my brilliance and hard work, except broken dreams in a studio apartment I couldn't afford. In my second life, I'd been powerful, strategic. I'd outplayed the people who'd tried to destroy me, and I'd built something better from the ashes of their betrayal. Some people might say that's not a happy ending. That true happiness comes from forgiveness, from letting go, from being the bigger person. But those people have never been betrayed by everyone who was supposed to love them unconditionally. I didn't need to forgive. I didn't need to let go. I didn't need to be the bigger person. I needed to win, and I did. 10 years after my rebirth, I stood in the auditorium at MIT about to deliver a keynote address to the graduating class. The girl I'd been, both versions of her, the naive one from my first life and the calculating one from my second, would never have imagined this moment. I looked out at the sea of faces, these brilliant young people about to step into a world that would test them, challenge them, and sometimes betray them. And I thought about what I could tell them that would actually matter. Your work has value, I began, echoing the speech I'd given years ago at that Women in Tech conference. Your intelligence has value. Your time, your effort, your creativity, all of it has value. And you should never, ever let anyone convince you otherwise. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Some of you will be lucky. You'll have families who support you, partners who respect you, friends who celebrate your success. Treasure those people. Protect those relationships. They're rare and precious. But some of you won't be lucky. Some of you will be surrounded by people who want to use you, who see your brilliance as something they're entitled to profit from. Family members who think your success belongs to them. Partners who resent your achievements. Friends who compete instead of celebrating. When that happens, not if but when, I want you to remember something. You owe them nothing. Not your work, not your money, not your success, not your happiness, nothing. I don't care if they're family. I don't care if they supported you. I don't care if they claim they made you who you are. If they respected you, they wouldn't be trying to take what's yours. If they loved you, they'd be happy for your success, not trying to exploit it. Protect yourselves. Document everything. Build your own power. And never, ever feel guilty for refusing to be used. You are brilliant. You are valuable. You are worthy of respect. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a place in your life. The applause was thunderous, sustained, the kind that makes your whole body vibrate. After the ceremony, students lined up to talk to me, to share their own stories, to ask for advice. One young woman, tears streaming down her face, told me, "My parents have been pressuring me to go into their family business instead of pursuing my own research. Everyone keeps telling me I'm being selfish. That family comes first. But your speech made me realize they're the ones being selfish. They're trying to steal my future." "Then don't let them," I said firmly. "Your future is yours alone. Anyone who tries to take it from you is not family. They're just thieves wearing familiar faces." As I drove home that night, exhausted but satisfied, I thought about both of my lives. The first one, where I'd been destroyed by my family's betrayal. The second one, where I'd orchestrated their destruction instead. Which version of me was happier? The answer was obvious: this version. The one who'd fought back, the one who'd refused to be a victim twice. The one who'd used her pain and her knowledge to build something unshakable. Sarah was waiting for me when I got home. Dinner warm in the oven, a glass of wine already poured. "How was the speech?" she asked, kissing me hello. "Good, really good. I think I actually helped some of them." "Of course you did. You always do." We ate dinner together, talking about our days, making plans for the weekend, existing in the comfortable intimacy of two people who'd built a real partnership based on mutual respect and genuine love. This was what I'd fought for, not the money, not the career success, not even the satisfaction of watching my family face consequences. This, a life of my own choosing, surrounded by people who actually valued me, free from the weight of familial obligation and toxic relationships. Later, as I lay in bed next to Sarah, listening to her breathe in the darkness, I thought about the girl I'd been in my first life. The one who'd trusted too easily, who'd believed that a family meant unconditional love, who'd died alone and broken. I hoped wherever she existed, in whatever metaphysical space held memories of lives that were erased by rebirth, that she could see this, could see that we'd won, that we'd survived, that we'd built exactly the life we'd deserved all along. Thank you, I whispered into the darkness, not sure if I was thanking fate or the universe or just my own stubborn refusal to be destroyed twice. The darkness didn't answer, but that was okay. I'd already gotten everything I needed. 15 years after my rebirth, IBM's quantum computing division unveiled a revolutionary encryption system based on technology I'd developed. My name was on the patent, properly documented, properly filed, properly protected. The licensing fees alone would set me up for life, and IBM's 70-30 split meant they were happy too. The press called it a triumph, a vindication, proof that brilliance and perseverance pay off. They didn't know the half of it. Standing at the press conference, fielding questions from reporters about my breakthrough, I saw a familiar face in the crowd, my brother Derek, older and grayer, wearing a cheap suit and holding a notebook. He'd gotten out of prison, apparently, and was working as a freelance tech journalist. Our eyes met. He looked away first. After the conference, he approached me hesitantly. "Lynn, congrats on the patent. It's really impressive work." "Thank you," I said neutrally. "Look, I know I don't deserve your time, but..." He swallowed hard. I've been sober 3 years. Been in therapy, trying to actually take responsibility for what we did to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm sorry for all of it." I studied him. He looked like he meant it. Looked like life had beaten him down enough that he'd finally developed something resembling humility and self-awareness. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but it doesn't change anything. You're still the person who stole from me. You're still the person who thought he was entitled to profit from my work. An apology doesn't erase that." "I know, I just needed you to hear it anyway." He walked away, and I watched him go. Part of me, a very small part, felt something like pity. But mostly I just felt indifferent. He was a stranger who shared my DNA, nothing more. That night, Jennifer came over for dinner. She'd become my real family, the sister I should have had all along. Over wine and Thai food, she asked, "Did you hear? Derek's out of prison?" "Yeah, he came to the press conference, apologized." "Are you going to?" "No," I said firmly. Sandas, no reconciliation, no second chances, no family reunions. He made his choices, I made mine. We exist in separate worlds now, and that's how it stays." She nodded approvingly. "Good. You've built something amazing, Lynn. Don't let them poison it with guilt trips and sob stories." "I won't. I learned that lesson thoroughly the first time around." She gave me a questioning look. I'd never told her about the rebirth, obviously, but didn't push. 20 years after my rebirth, I retired from IBM as chief research officer. I was 55, technically 75 if you counted both lives, wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined possible and ready for a new chapter. Sarah and I bought a house in Italy, a renovated farmhouse with olive groves and a view of the mountains. We traveled, we wrote, we mentored young researchers remotely. We built a life that was entirely ours with no obligations to anyone except each other. One morning, sitting on our terrace with coffee and the sunrise, Sarah said, "You know what I love about you? My stunning beauty and razor-sharp wit." She laughed. "Well, yes, but also your ruthlessness. Not in a bad way, in a protective way. You don't let anyone hurt you. You don't let anyone take what's yours. You're like a fortress." "Fortresses are cold and isolated," I pointed out. "Not yours. Yours has a gate, and you let the right people in. You're just very, very careful about who those people are." I kissed her, tasting coffee and contentment. I had to learn to be careful the hard way. "Well, I'm grateful you let me pass the walls." "You earned it by never trying to tear them down," I said. "You respected my boundaries, respected my past, respected my need to protect myself. That's why you're here." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. I thought about my parents sometimes. Wondered if they were still alive, still struggling with debt, still bitter about their downfall. I thought about Derek occasionally, hoped he'd actually become a better person, but didn't particularly care either way. Mostly, though, I didn't think about them at all. They were footnotes in my story, obstacles I'd overcome, villains I'd defeated. But they weren't the point of my story. The point was this: the sunrise over Italian mountains, the woman I loved beside me, the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal, and the gift of impossible rebirth. I'd been given two lives. In the first, I'd been destroyed. In the second, I'd been the destroyer, and I'd do it all again without hesitation. Because that's the thing about revenge. When it's done right, when the punishment truly fits the crime, it's not just satisfying, it's freedom.